What's up, everybody? This is Thomas Bahamas, and you are here for Solana Weekly. Millions of people are showing up and taking part in Web3 and blockchain every day, every week. And guess what? The majority of them are showing up on Solana. I am a Solana enjoyer myself and have been trying to figure out this space since 2022. I have a tech background and an obsession with figuring out the latest trends and trying out all the latest apps and protocols. Join me as we dive into another episode of Solana Weekly to learn as much as we can about the fastest blockchain and the amazing ecosystem being built on top of that blockchain. Thank you for joining in, and let's get to the show. I am super excited for today's episode. We have Omar from AgriDex on, and I'm really excited to bring them on because they're solving real world problems with Solana in places that I think need the most. The more I learn about AgriDex, the more excited I get for a future that's backed by Solana. So I'm really excited for it. Omar, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Thomas. Thank you so much for having me on today. And I know it's quite a busy day. I don't know when this is going to be released, but I think it's the day after the election. So lots and lots to talk about. I almost don't want to talk about AgriDex today.
Yeah, it's hard because it's a Solana Weekly show. So we do it weekly. We've got to talk about the news. And I've been a little bit too chipper this morning. Got a crazy morning. The coins are pumping. We got a new president coming in. I guess we'll see the effects, but at least for the US, we should be seeing a lot lighter regulations, especially on crypto. So I'm excited for that part. We'll see how crazy and, how the news cycle goes. But I mean, I think for crypto, I think this is a pretty big win. So.
No, definitely. I think as you said, we're seeing how the markets are reacting to it. And then hopefully on our side, it just makes it a lot easier from a regulation perspective moving forward.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm hoping. And, the focus right now on Solana, when you think about, what everyone's doing on Solana, what people in general are coming to Solana for, it's a lot of meme coins, NFTs are kind of in the background. But what I think is really cool to hear is to actually learn about real businesses that are being run on Solana and they're kind of opening up new use cases. So when you guys came up and we spoke before and you explained what you guys are doing, how it's enabling your clients to just receive a much better product. And so I really want people to hear the other side of the story. And I'm excited to hear more, and I'd love to hear you kind of tell us all about what you guys are up to at AgriDex and what you guys have built out.
No, more than happy to. I think whenever I describe what AgriDex does, I tried to tell my mum and my dad when I first started, and they just glazed over the whole thing. And so I learned the way you understand AgriDex first is to understand what is the problem. And we have a typical example that we tend to use to illustrate it. For those who don't know, if you're a Nigerian farmer hoping to move a ton of cocoa from Nigeria to Rotterdam, you'll be paying roughly 12.4% of the total trade in transaction costs, which is a ridiculous amount of money. But if you think about it from the cost of sourcing the cocoa in the first place to getting your relevant legal bills or crop specific certifications, from moving it from one warehouse to Nigeria, shipping it across, physical inspection, distribution to the buyers, storing warehouses, there's so much that gets eaten away. And that's not even taking into account how much you pay for conversion of USD to Naira. Yes, you could pay like 3 to 6% to the banks, but there's also the time perspective. This can typically take up to like 5 days. And if it's during a period of currency volatility, you can lose another 5% in real terms. And so all of that is stacking up. And the people who are taking on most of the costs are the producers themselves. And this isn't the only thing they're exposed to. There's geopolitical risk, increase want from consumers for sustainability standards, personnel problems, population growth. And so it's really reaching a critical junction right now in the agricultural world, one which has typically been, I don't know how right this is to say, but more opposed to change than some of the other traditional fields. And so I feel like now is the right time for disruption and to support them where we can. And that's where AgriDex comes in. AgriDex is a digital marketplace where we offer instant low-cost settlements with transparency throughout the entire agricultural value chain, which is a lot of buzzwords, but really what it means is we are built on Solana, and we use USDC for our transactions. All of our transactions are settled automatically as well, and payment is near instantaneous as well. So what would typically be 12 point something percent of the total transaction cost in 65 days, through using AgriDex, you can reduce that down to 5.8% and only 40 days for the entire transaction.
Yeah, which is amazing. And now, when you talk about transaction costs alone for a lot of these farmers or when they're producing all this, they don't have these type of margins to spare, right? These are people hanging on. If they have a 10% margin, they're doing great, right? So if they are eating away 12% of that with transaction costs, like that is a huge difference, right? Like that's over 10% of, their total cost is going to be just for the transaction alone. Where you guys are able to actually just use Solana to have that settle. And now, something that you also said is they're actually settling in dollars, right? Is that how the current contracts all settle in dollars, and then they go back to their native currency? Is that how
Yes.
it's currently run? And then you guys can kind of imitate that on blockchain as well.
Yeah, so we do our transactions and it's settlement in USDC, but we've also partnered with a host of powerhouse partners to help us with on and off ramping into local currencies in these emerging markets, which, to be honest, I think is one of the most impressive selling points of what we're doing over here. If you we had a talk prior to this, and I listed off some of our partners, and it's really interesting because in the days that followed since we last spoke, one of our partners, Bridge, was actually bought out by Stripe as their biggest ever acquisition. So
Yeah,
it shows
over
how,
$1 billion, right?
yeah, right. Their biggest ever, I believe that's their biggest ever acquisition as well at that.
Yeah.
And it shows how traditional, the traditional finance people are starting to become more aware of stable coins are very much here to stay. And not only that, they're going to change the way that we transact in the future. And so very lucky that we got in when we did. The guys over there are absolutely fantastic, and we're looking forward to working further with them.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. One of the biggest crypto acquisitions ever, I think. And now, one thing that you brought up is, so you're changing all those currencies over to their local currencies. Are those going to like OTC desks to them, or are those going to like exchange to bank accounts? Like, how does that normally work?
So in the way that we're doing it is it's going to be direct to the bank accounts of the people who are on our platform. Yes. And big part of it is, what we're doing at AgriDex is our transactions are B2B. We're not doing a B2C product. And a big part of it is we want to make sure that everything we're doing is regulated and compliant. And once we're dealing with these large volumes, a very important thing is that everyone who's on the platform goes through rigorous KYB, AML checks. So I'm getting into the acronym stuff. So know your business check. It's basically checks that people do to make sure that the people you're transacting with are safe to do so and non-fraudulent. AML checks, that's to ensure that we're not transacting with anyone who is currently sanctioned.
Yeah.
So it's all very much above ground. And so we do it directly into their bank accounts. Don't get me wrong, it's very difficult to get that in place. That's why we have a host of partners who are supporting us on that, but it seems to be going really well. And hopefully we'll be able to have the first live results for everyone to see as the platform launches out of beta very soon.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's always been the hardest part of the regulation, or where the regulators, at least in the US, have always focused, is like the connection between crypto exchanges and bank accounts, right? Like here, a lot of bank accounts just get shut down because they interact with crypto exchanges. So, I have my main bank account, and I don't use any direct crypto exchanges for that bank account, just in case they close it, right? So I have to like send it to a second bank account and then send it there just in case. I'm hoping that changes, but I mean, I can't imagine trying to do that while running a full like farming operation as well. Like I feel like that's something that, unless you're, I don't even know. Like it just seems like that seems like something you wouldn't want to focus on you wouldn't want to even deal with if you're one of these businesses, right? Um, so
No, and I think you're completely right. And it's one of the things that's scary about bringing a Web3 product to such a Web2 customer base.
yeah,
There is that trepidation. And I'm not even sure if they'd be aware of that when they go into it. People are just intimidated by the idea of wallet addresses and sending something off and it just disappearing into the nether as well. So that's something that we really consider at AgriDex, because we're not just creating a Web3 product. We have to present it and package it in a way to an audience that's probably, especially more so than others, I hesitate to use the word hostile, but more crepid about a Web3 solution.
yeah, definitely. I feel like the way that crypto in general is looked at is pretty tough. Like you're mentioning Web3, like I feel like Web3 is a lot softer of a term to use than like, hey, this is a crypto wallet. Like actually like Web3 starts to make sense. And especially when you're dealing with businesses, right? Like you want to kind of avoid, like what I'm dealing with most of the time, avoid the degeneracy and say like, hey, like actually like what they're doing is paving the way for like, what we're able to do. But, don't focus on that at all. But
Oh,
yeah. And, one thing that we talked about last time, so I actually worked at an ag tech startup for, it was like 7 years or so. And I'm in the US, so it's a little bit different, but, um, I, what we always found is that a lot of people in the ag space, like they're using technology every day and they use it all the time, like in every different way, but they're so reluctant to change, right? Like they act like they're not that tech focused, but they, they're like at the forefront of a lot of these technologies. They take data in, they have like great tools for analyzing it and spitting out like, and that was like what I focus on was basically like data input and data output, right? So a lot of it's like inputs and outputs of a farm. How much does it cost to do this? Where are we sending everything? What are our yields projected to be? What contracts do we have for all that? So the company that I work for wouldn't actually probably interact with your platform, right? This would be once everything's already harvested, everything's getting sent from, the actual producer out to the market, right? Is that, yeah. And
yeah.
then,
So, if you'd like, I could give you a walkthrough, because I think that's an easier way to understand where does AgriDex come into the whole transaction part.
I'd love to hear that.
No, so let's imagine in this case, I'm going to use the same example before, like we're Nigerian farmers and we've got a bunch of cocoa that we'd like to sell. So first thing we do is we say, I'd like to get on the AgriDex platform. And that could be done through a number of ways. If they have someone who they typically work with higher up in the supply chain, if they've been integrated into the AgriDex system, they can help and support them. We're planning to have customer success and partnership teams on the ground within these emergent markets. Or if they are savvy enough, they could go onto the website and submit an application to get put onto the AgriDex site. It will require some basic documentation, but nothing too excessive. These are to make sure you pass your previously mentioned KYB and AML checks, and then some certification regarding their sustainability standards, ESG certificates if they have any, and crop-specific certificates, which will be necessary. And then from there, they can get started as long as they pass all of the checks. So now we're on the platform. Next thing that happens is we upload our crops and all of the details for our profile, so that the buyers know who they're interacting with. We have built-in trust scores for our sellers. These will be algorithmically calculated from a variety of factors, including but not limited to their past transactions and the quality of certifications that they've uploaded. We've gone onto the platform and we've now uploaded our crop. We've seen real time what the price of the crop is. And now we've been contacted by a buyer. He says, hey, I'd like to buy some cocoa. Could you give me 2 tons of cocoa at so-and-so price? Then we move on to something that is known as your Incoterms. Now, your Incoterms is essentially when you decide with the when the buyer and seller decide at this point, okay, this is no longer my problem. It's now the buyer's. So
This is like the transaction has been completed.
Yes. So they've settled on the fact that they want to do a transaction, but the Incoterms determine when the transaction will be completed. So in this case, let's use our same example. Hey, I can take it to a distribution warehouse in Nigeria, but I can't take it any further than that at the moment. So as part of the Incoterms, once it reaches the distribution warehouse and it goes through physical inspection, it is now the buyer's problem. So we agree on that. And what happens is we generate what's known as a Ricardian contract. And don't worry for even the more savvy ones listening, not many people have heard what that is. So a Ricardian contract is a human and machine readable contract. And we integrate that with a smart contract so that once those terms are achieved and confirmed, it will automatically settle and pay out to the seller.
So that's both like you're actually having a physical contract, and then basically you guys are mimicking that on chain with a smart contract that's going to execute once it's actually settled. Is that right? So
Yes. And the settlement itself in the future, it's going to be automatic as we integrate Internet of Things, AI and ML, but at this moment in time, it's going to have to be manually done as we build out and focus on the settlement aspect.
Very cool. Very cool. So with that, now you guys are an RWA where this is a real world asset. So at that point, is it the contract that is representing, the actual commodity that is the RWA, or how do you explain that part to us? 'Cause I feel like RWAs for some reason confuse me every time. Like a lot of times it's just like a price feed for, a different asset, but like what is that part?
No, and I completely agree with you. It can be confusing what part of it is. And I think the important thing to know about AgriDex and how we differ from other people is that others in the agricultural space, they tend to tokenize the crop or produce itself. Whereas we do it differently. We actually tokenize the trade itself. Once we agree on the contract, like an NFT is minted off the contract as well. And so it's immutable and you could always see what's there. You might be asking, so what's the advantage of that? Well, if you do tokenize the crop, there are some limitations that you run into with liquidity, scalability, but also the nature of crops is that they are perishable and subject to the environment, so to speak. Whereas with the trade, if we tokenize, okay, this trade from here to here, you're going to give me so-and-so cocoa that fulfills this criteria. You could use any cocoa within your storage in order to fulfill that. Whereas if you use the crop that you've tokenized, you have to use that exact one which you've tokenized. So there's
which might not necessarily be there.
Right? Exactly, right?
Yeah, so
and it could go
before, yeah.
So it adds a lot more flexibility for what could be done. And then also a lot more cool stuff of what you could do with trade finance, invoice factoring and the like. So that's why we decided to go down the trade route. We also feel it makes it a lot easier when it comes to the inspection, then who's in charge of what when it comes to the transaction itself.
Yeah. And so when you're actually tokenizing that, so the terms are actually tokenized as well. So it's like, hey, this is what we agreed upon. We agreed upon this. We agreed upon this. This is tokenized and immutable from this point. Like if there's an argument over terms, it's like, well, hey, look at the actual terms in the NFT. This is what we both signed. There's, yes, there's always, something that you can go back and forth on a little bit, but the terms are solid, right? So the solid contract, it gets rid of a lot of the he said, she said stuff, right?
Yeah, no, entirely. And I think the part that we were discussing about how do you, there will be legal disputes. Despite all of this, there still will be legal disputes. I think it's just human nature and as you're dealing with this. And so we have an inherent advantage at AgriDex that a number of competitors don't, in that we are based in the UK, which no one ever says is an advantage anymore for many reasons. But there was one thing that the UK did that was really forward thinking in 2023, which was the UK Electronic Trade Document Act. And essentially what that meant is that allowed us to implement Ricardian contracts, because based on us being a UK entity, should there be any dispute between two parties, we could use English High Court in order to arbitrate for this. And aside from the likes of America and France, a lot of the world wants access to the prestige and background of the English High Court, which is a unique selling factor.
Which would generally be considered a very fair court to hear their arguments on either side, where a lot of the clients that you're dealing with, they don't have access to that a lot of times, right? Like you mentioned Nigeria, or I think there's a lot of clients in like the South Africa area where they might not have the best court system. They might not have a good place to actually argue, their position in court, where you guys would provide that in long term. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also the argument between the two jurisdictions. If you're someone in Europe versus someone in South Africa debating about where they're going to arbitrate, this cuts through all of that and provides a middle ground where disputes can solve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, court as a service as well. It's almost like a little bit of like something there.
Might have to trademark that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, especially if, you could potentially lose your crop. A lot of these, at least a lot of the companies that we worked with didn't have that much runway, right? Like a lot of them, every harvest, every year, they're putting it all out there. So, it comes down to, people take these contracts very seriously, and it could be make it or break it for a lot of them. So, it would make sense for them to choose a platform with the potential of, having a reasonable court to back them up.
No, I definitely think it's one of the big selling points. And again, who would have thought that would come from Britain?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like a weird benefit to think about, because that's not, necessarily what you guys were going for right out of the bat, right?
No, exactly. Sometimes the stars just align.
Yeah. Yeah. And we mentioned those different jurisdictions. So one thing that you mentioned before was the reception to Web3 or crypto or Solana in general, like makes a lot more sense for them, right? Like there isn't as big of a barrier to understanding a dollarized, like a tokenized dollar in Solana, because a lot of their own currencies aren't necessarily the best. So they're seeking out, like they see a tokenized dollar that, holds its store of value considerably better than their local currency. That is another advantage to them. And they're able to, settle their trades in that and then get it back in their native currency. It seems like a pretty great system for them, right? Has that been your experience?
No, definitely. And I think a lot of people who have it, well, myself personally, before I got immersed into this, I didn't realize how crypto forward some of the markets that we're moving into are, because of those pressures that you mentioned. I read a stat somewhere that I don't even know if I still believe it right now, but apparently 70-something% of all Nigerians have held crypto at one point in their life.
No way. 77?
Yeah, 70-something, but it was an incredible number. I don't know where they got that from, but it also mimics, how Venezuelans were some of the first adopters of Bitcoin and you're starting to see that as people get more online access to more information. What would have been considered as a very difficult barrier to entry a few years back is now considered as, a beginner level thing that accepted. I think that's why people are also more open to crypto. As a result, the dearth of information that there is now, it's completely different to what it was in 2015, 2016, when we had the first big boom.
Yeah. It's funny. So you mentioned 2015 and 2016, the company that I work for. So it was an ag tech startup, and one of our clients asked us to integrate with Bitcoin. And this was before everything was pretty mainstream. This was
no way.
Kind of early days. And I went to our developers, and we had like one of our stand-up calls that we had every week. And I brought up so I don't think this is a good idea, but let's talk about integrating Bitcoin into our system. And they're just I heard like a rant about 100 reasons why we should integrate with Bitcoin. But what they finished it with was how cool Bitcoin actually was from their perspective as
Mm.
developers. So like, starting from that conversation, I actually bought Bitcoin because of it. I thought it was cool and kind
I'm
of like,
really surprised that you mentioned that they'd be talking about that at that time in an ag tech company. They must be
yeah,
really ahead for their time.
yeah, it was a, like, they thought it was a completely like, there was no way we were going to do it. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if it was like a one-off. It seemed like a serious request. So I was like, I might as well put it out there and see how it goes. But yeah, nothing really came of it, but I bought some Bitcoin because of it and, kind of got me down this path.
Oh, fantastic. There's always one thing that drags everyone in. You're lucky you got your first experience with Bitcoin in 2016 because I saw it exploding in 2016 and I wanted to be the edgy person. So I was like, oh my God, guys, Ripple, it's going to be used by Japanese banks. It's going to explode. I was like the only one of my friends to lose money around that time.
Yeah. Yeah, those like when ICOs kind of started up. I think I got a little bit of Stellar too. It's wild times. It was wild times. But one of the things that we found at our company was it was the next generation that was coming in to take over farms. The younger kids, or
Mhm.
not necessarily kids anymore, but the younger generations were coming into the farms, and they were, hey, you guys are using pen and paper for everything. I can't read these contracts. Like, let's put them all online. Let's digitize them. Let's see what else is out there. So what we saw was like a lot of farms almost like skipped a generation. So it was almost like, they're passing down farms from like grandparents that, really didn't use too much technology down to like a very tech focused younger generation. And that was who actually brought up that Bitcoin question was, one of the younger guys that was into it. So it's like, I'm wondering if you're kind of seeing that too. And that's kind of where a lot of this push is coming from. Cause it seems like there's a good demand for technology and in agriculture.
No, there definitely is a demand. And I think the thing that you said about intergenerational attitudes is very, very true. Especially in the markets that we're working in, it tends to be an older farmer base. The younger generation within these emergent markets are saying, you know what, I don't want to do farming. I want to, work in an office, get an Excel job, right? It's very difficult to convince them. And in part, it is those margins that we were talking about. It is the fact that the truth is a lot of human advancement was to get away from the fact that nobody wants to do farming 24 hours a day to sustain
Yeah.
themselves. So it's definitely difficult to break through that. But I think, we're getting to the point where we are reaching that next generation. And even for the older generation, as long as you could package what you're offering to them in simple to understand terms, as opposed to like, don't tell them anything about Ricardian contracts and NFTs because
Yeah.
nobody wants to listen to that. If you tell them we can put more money in your pocket and it's nice, quick, easy to use application, that's how you sell it to them. Put it in their own words with a frame of reference that they
Oh,
personally
yeah.
understand. But you're right, it is very difficult. I remember, oh God, I read about another person who was doing, they were doing tokenized crops and the like, and they ran into the problem of getting farmers to use their apps. And so what they did was they actually sent their developers out to live with these farmers for 6 months or something in order to understand how they interact with the apps. The truth is, if they came back and they didn't have like any high school education and they didn't have access to technology, what they did was they changed their application so that different sections of their apps related to primary colors and shapes as well, so that people can make those basic associations. And I think while we're not doing it as rudimentary as that at AgriDex, we're really trying to give it as much of a Web 2 experience when people log on to it. You're not going to know what your wallet address is. That's why we partner with the partners that we do. So they have custodianship of the wallets itself. It's going to be as easy and seamless an experience for you as using your banking app.
Yeah, it really has to be. I mean, it's got to be intuitive and like that. I feel like we're at a point now on Solana where like the performance is really showing. Like Solana's been running great, ever since it slowed down a couple months ago. So I feel like now we're at the point where you can actually abstract, the fact that you're using blockchain away from it. And that's what would need to be done, right? I think getting people to enter data on a smartphone was always pretty tough. But if you can make something that, hey, if you can send a text message, you can use this app, they'll do it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if it's going to save them time and they can see it, and there's benefits if it saves them money, they're going to do it. They're going to find a way to do it. As soon as they start kind of seeing those benefits, I think it just makes sense, right?
And I also do think that, how I was telling you about, it feels like it's a critical juncture for agriculture with the amount of financial pressure there is and all of the other external pressures that come along. A lot of technology or new revolutionary technology tends to be taken up during times of difficulty. Like,
Oh yeah,
you see like World War II and how that led to so many people taking it on, or just like the AIDS crisis in Haiti and how that modernized it. It's once you reach a point where the external pressures get too much, you start to see people becoming more open-minded and happy to go out of their safe space so that they could try something new. And I'd like to think we are reaching that point where people are starting to venture out and try something new.
yeah. I,
I
I
read
think so too.
somewhere, yeah, I read somewhere it was a McKinsey report, so don't hold me to that, yeah, McKinsey, but uh, they said like something like 4% of farmers use online banking or do online transactions,
Really,
but 70% want to. So there's the appetite there, but
yeah.
they've just not been introduced to something that gives them a reason to change from their traditional methods.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them know that the change is coming. They just don't necessarily know, the methods to get started. Right. Uh,
Exactly. It's on us to do the education, really. We
yep.
can't expect them to do it all by themselves. So it's very much an education aspect to AgriDex, making sure that we can reach that mass adoption.
Yeah. And I think the current trend, at least in, California where I am, there's a good amount of agriculture in California. Like people don't really talk about it. You think about California, you think about either San Francisco, Silicon Valley, or Hollywood, right? Those are like the main attractions. But like the rest of the state, like they grow a ton of food, right? Like it's a great climate for food.
Yeah.
But all of them are struggling. Like the big companies are struggling. Like there are no margins anymore, right? Like a lot of the bigger companies are actually like kind of farming at a loss, So
Yeah.
then you see this weird thing where there's bankruptcies and if one company takes it over and then they go under. So it's kind of a mess right now. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we see, kind of big changes start to take effect here too. Just because of the way the current trend is. And it's not like the sexiest career to have, right? Like it's not like everyone's trying to do it. And in California, it's like, yeah, it's a massive part of the economy, but the amount of people that are actually doing it, like it's like less than 5% of the population, it's probably even lower than that, is actually in ag and farming, right? So it is large on the like total value and GDP size, but like for the population that's actually doing it, it's pretty small.
Mhm. Right. And that's something we're seeing that it's only continuing to shrink as well in the last, was it 20 years or so? We went from 40 something percent of the population being farmers to now in the high 20s as well.
Yeah.
And I don't see that suddenly changing at any point. There's nothing really there. So it's on us to help those who are currently still within that so that they're not forced to leave because of market pressures.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that look like? So if you guys are marketing towards a specific region or a specific area, or like what's the best way to that you guys use to actually like acquire new business? Is it marketing? Is it just going down talking to the it's not like a read this and sign up type thing, right? Like what encompasses like getting a new client, right? It seems like you guys have your hands full with probably taking crazier questions that I'm giving you, right? So it's
Mhm.
probably a lot, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. If we went down to try and get each individual farmer on board, it would take us centuries to finally achieve like profit margins, right? So
Yeah.
the way that we're working right now is, and the reason why I'm personally excited about what's happening at AgriDex is we have a host of fantastic launch partners, got powerhouses in West and South Africa. These are groups such as like the Paragate group, who have thousands and thousands of producers under them. And by working together with these launch partners, we could tell them, hey, we can massive. And these are the guys who really understand that if you can deliver a highly efficient bit of technology that also reduce it, like gives them increased profit margins, they're more likely to take it on. And then from there, they're also likely to help in the education of their farmers as well, because it's in their vested interest too. So by working at one level higher at the supply chain, we can reach so many more people than we would if we went as individuals. And then from there, there's also the network effect. We've been very lucky that our leadership have extensive experience in both agriculture and commodities. Like Henry, our CEO, for example, he came from a multi-generational farming family in Africa. And he was the youngest commodities trader at Trafigura. So he has a lot of experience with doing transactions and dealing with friction across like complex jurisdictions. So he has a whole bunch of people in his network who were really interested in this and who he learned from as to what these problems are that exist. Or Russell, our exec chairman, he was like founder investor at DeepMind, but he was also the head of equities research at Deutsche Bank for a period of time. So there's a lot of our C-suite well, at least in my opinion, there's a lot of connections into the traditional world, which I think there's so much cool Web3 tech, so much cool stuff that really has the potential to innovate like so many different fields of life, deep in like health wearables, anything and everything. But they struggle with marketing. A lot of startups have fantastic products. They die because of their distribution.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
They realize it as a second time founder, really. And that's why VCs tend to like second or third time founders, because they've gone through and experienced those problems. And I feel like that's something where we're really lucky at AgriDex, that we have such fantastic launch partners and strategic partners to help us with building out the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great. Sounds like you guys have everything kind of put together from different angles. So I'm super excited to see where you guys go with that. And I feel like early on when I was researching AgriDex, I was like, all right, I think I read Henry's bio and was like, all right. My first thoughts were, all right, they're going to be bringing commodities online so we can like trade, corn futures or something along those lines. Where that's not the case at all. It's not a trading app. It's not for, the everyday person to come on and actually trade, right? This is for real use cases. This is big businesses to big businesses. This is not, the everyday user is not going to be interacting with AgriDex, right?
Yeah, I think the DEX in AgriDex always confuses people. Right?
Yeah, a little bit, right?
You're the first person to say it.
Yes. No, that's cool. Cool. And let's see. So what have you guys been up to lately? I know it's been a couple of weeks since we spoke, because you guys have been kind of heads down, raising, building. Let's hear about all of it.
Yeah. God, where do I start with? So in terms of development, we have, well, by the time this podcast comes out, we should have announced the day that our coin will be listed, which should be on the 29th of November on a bunch of exchanges. Here again, this time I won't get ahead of marketing. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. We are, AgriDex is a DAO because we do believe in, it's not, why would you be in Web3 if you don't believe in democratization of some sort, right?
Yeah.
But not only that, we also tried to build in some really cool utility into the coin as well, so that we could get people who are in retail to engage with it, who actually want to give back. So it's used as a medium of exchange on our platforms. And also I really like, we're going to be implementing a staking mechanism where holders can earn rewards through staking, but parts of the staking profits will be directed towards environmental or like agri-development projects, so that, get yield, they can contribute to real world sustainability alongside it. So that's something cool that's coming out pretty soon. The platform is going to beta testing with a number of our launch partners, and it's going really well. And we're looking to do the full rollout of the platform I believe, Q1 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting from the product perspective. We're running a number of airdrop campaigns. We recently announced a partnership with Solana Saga and Seeker, and we've got loads more that we're going to be announcing in the next coming weeks.
Oh, it's awesome. I've got
Yeah.
one ordered, so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let me send you the link. You have to get involved with the airdrop campaign. Get yourself some agri in there.
Yes, yeah, no, I definitely do, and so it sounds like there's going to be some staking for the token. So if some of our listeners wanted to get involved, sounds like the token's coming out, towards the end of the month here. They can check out. I think you guys have a pretty active Discord going on. You could go in there, take place in some of the airdrop campaigns, and eventually stake it. Is it a governance token as well for the DAO, so you can kind of vote on things, or how does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of it is going to be so we want to give people governance rights so that they can propose and vote on platform changes, because we're starting off, and of course, when you start off, it's got to be a bit centralized, especially like the nature of what we're doing. But our end goal is that we want to move to a hybrid and then eventually fully into it down so that people can take control of the platform themselves and guide it, because this is eventually going to be for farmers by people who understand what farmers are going through.
Yeah,
And
that would be such an awesome future where they all were like participating and voting and could like actually implement the changes that they want to see by voting on chain. That would be awesome.
No, exactly. Because the truth is, we're only a sample of one, right? As much as I've said we're good at this, that, and the other, I'm not a farmer, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I can read about it, I could talk to them, but until I'm there, I don't really understand it. So I really do believe in the democratization of what we're doing.
Yeah. And I feel like that was always a struggle for me. Was I would hear, from clients that they wanted, these 100 things, or, the most important are these 3 things, and we need them by this year. You go to your developers, they say, no way. But it's like, all right, what do we do? But this way, you're actually getting the feedback directly from everybody, that's actually using your platform. And that would be a really cool way to direct resources, go from there.
No, definitely. And so I'm excited to see how it builds it out. I've got some really high hopes for it, and I hope it can deliver on that. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed in our end.
I'm super excited to just kind of see it built out and see what you guys can do, right? This is real life use cases on Solana. This is like, completely aside from everything that I deal with on the day-to-day on Solana, right? This is away from the degen stuff. This is actually like helping people out that need it. So I'm very excited for that. And if you're okay, I've got a couple quick rapid fire questions and then we'll wrap this up.
Oh, more than ready. More than ready.
Sounds good. So when you think about, I guess you guys are still kind of in beta right now, but something that I always think about is like what metrics like matter the most in Solana? Like what metrics would you say that you're following? Like, are you most concerned about, getting new clients? Well, you work in business development, so that's probably what it is for you, but I'll let you take it.
Do you mean as AgriDex as a whole, what we're looking at?
Yeah.
So there's a few KPIs, but I think one of the most important ones is total flow and volume on the platform. We have big ambitions. And so we've got to show that we can deal with the scale that we're hoping to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So if we can prove that, then I think that's something really compelling that you could go to other potential launch partners like, hey, we were able to deal with so-and-so volume, and we were still able to do it instantaneously, cheap, and there's no messing up whatsoever. The platform is safe for you to come on and improve your profit margins. So I think for me personally, that's the most compelling KPI that we can track.
Yeah. That's huge. You can prove out how much you're actually doing. So if they're just coming in with a small portion of it, it won't be a problem, right?
Right.
Yeah. Any metrics that you think of in Solana that you guys would focus on? I mean, I would imagine, transactions have to land, but anything else that you can think of?
It's Solana specific ones. That's a really interesting question because I've never really considered that from that perspective. One thing that I do want to do is I personally love the Solana ecosystem, and what I do as part of BD is building out partnerships. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to essentially create an ecosystem where people from other Solana communities start to become more aware of what we're doing at AgriDex. Because as you said, we all love a bit of degen stuff. Why do you think we're on Solana, right?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
there's so much potential there as well for the real world applications, and there's other people like what Parcel are doing, or MetaWell, the other guys over there are doing. And so I'd like to build out the official partnerships at AgriDex and just get those ecosystems working together. So I have some numbers in mind and a group of people that I'd like to speak to as well, but won't get ahead of myself here.
Yeah, well, if you do end up building that out, come back on the show whenever. You're welcome to come back on when you guys are launching and talk about that, or anytime anything else comes up, because I'm excited about this. I think it's cool, and especially if you partner up with other people that are doing cool in the space. Like I want to hear about it. I want to hear about what they're up to too. So that's
Oh no, absolutely. This has been my favorite podcast so far. Get me first, don't worry.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, let's see what else. Everything goes well in 5 years. Where do you see AgriDex?
Where do I see it AgriDex? In 5 years' time, if it all goes well and we hit all of our targets, I would like to hope that we've expanded out of our emergent markets. We've proven that we could do it in West and South Africa with all of the complex jurisdictions. And then from there, we go to other areas where there's more equal opportunities, where they're suffering through similar problems, but maybe not to the same extent. And so I like the idea of potentially expanding out into Latin America, because there's a huge agricultural market there and they're going through very much the same problems over here. So for me, Latin American expansion is a big one. I would like to see what we're planning to do during those 5 years. We're planning to make AgriDex the all-in-one platform. Right now, the main focus is on settlement, and we said how we're building out the aspects of trade finance, but I'd like to make sure that you could do everything, like almost the Amazon of agricultural trading, which I'm sure everyone says when they say their 5-year plans.
No, it's what you want to do. I think that's a good plan. I mean, 5 years in crypto is like a lifetime, right? So you never know where we're going to be, but I mean, you got to have that North Star, right?
Right. No, next time if you see me in 5 years' time, I guarantee I'm going to have a full head of gray hair from the space that crypto is going.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to turn it off, right?
I know. Always just in bed, like, oh, I'm going to go to bed. Let me just look at a chart really quickly.
Yeah.
I might have even just in case.
Yeah, you open up that meme coin chat, and it's hard to put it away.
Well, you're telling me. But no, I digress.
Sounds good. Well, Omar, I really appreciate you coming on the show. As I said, welcome back whenever you guys have anything else going on. I love what you guys are doing at AgriDex. Keep up the good work. And if I can ever help out, just let me know.
Thomas, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on the podcast. Really enjoyed being there with someone who understands what they're doing. And as I mentioned, I'm going to have to send you our very first transaction on chain. For the viewers who don't know, AgriDex did their first transaction in July, and we bought across some South African olive oil. So there's one with your name on it that I've been keeping in the office. I'm going to make sure to send it across to you this week. And then hopefully by the time we have our next podcast meeting, you could tell us how good that olive oil was.
Oh, amazing. Really appreciate it and looking forward to it.
Brilliant. You take care, Tom.
All right, Omar. Back to you later.
All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Solana Weekly. Once again, this is Thomas Bahamas, and I have one final ask for you guys. If you could, please subscribe on whatever player you're listening to. You could leave a review. That would be amazing. If you want to shill me your bags, work for them. But yeah, really appreciate it. And as always, this is not financial advice, but I want you guys to accelerate, move forward, and let's get this bag. I'll catch you guys next week.